practice session on assumption questions for CLAT and AILET. I'm assuming most of you already know the basic theory, so this won't be a concept-heavy class. We'll be spending most of the time solving questions and building the instinct required to spot the correct assumption under examination conditions. Before we begin, we'll spend some time over discussing the initial assumption concept. That'll be very quick, and then we'll move on to the questions. So this will be the agenda. Quick recap of the initial theory. Question solving, of course. Identifying common traps, which is the incorrect options, how these incorrect options are phrased, and the examination strategy towards the end, right? So let's start. Assumptions is equal to necessary premises, right? So every time I do an assumption class, I tell people that you start linking these two words very closely. Assumption and necessary. They always go together in the context of the questions that we get in CLAT and AILET. So premise, because assumption supports the argument, just like a premise does. And unlike an ordinary premise, it is never stated explicitly. More importantly, it is necessary because if we remove it, the argument falls apart. If the argument can survive without any of the options, then that question cannot be the assumption, right? So the question, in every question that we ask, right, when we are solving these questions, we are looking at these options. The question to ask is whether this option is actually necessary for the argument to hold. We are not looking for something that is, is it fair to assume this? I'm looking at an option many a times. People mark correct options, the students mark correct options as those statements that look reasonable to them, that they think, oh, this can be assumed, right? The author is talking about this, so this can be assumed. We are not actually asking that question, whether something can be assumed, whether something is reasonable to our minds, right? In the assumption questions, the only question that we are asking is it absolutely necessary for the argument to hold? Can the argument work without this? If the argument can work without this, this is not the assumption, right? So assumption and necessary, hand in hand. So the wrong answers, right? So every time we do these critical reasoning questions, whether they are passage-based or whether they are AILET types, they are based on a small paragraph, small text. Every time we do these questions, assumptions or otherwise, the best approach is always to eliminate the wrong choices out. We do this for inference, we do this for main idea, and this is still a good approach when we are solving assumption questions. So we eliminate the options that are incorrect. Now, what are these incorrect options? How are they devised? How will a test maker devise these incorrect options, right? So first up, so usually they'll belong to three categories. First up is something which has no impact on the argument. Now, these options could be discussing something that's not really discussed in the argument. They may be outside the scope of the argument, or they may be just completely irrelevant to the author's conclusion, right? So I said irrelevant to the author's conclusion. So it becomes important when I'm doing these questions to fix the conclusion first. What is that the author is arguing for, right? So be very sure of the conclusion statement, earmark it, underline it, right? And then when you are going through these options in the assumption question, just eliminate those options that have no impact on this argument or on this conclusion, that have no effect, any meaningful effect on the conclusion statement, right? So anything that has no impact, irrelevant, is out. Next, something that weakens the argument. So obviously, when I'm looking for something that is necessary for the argument, I'm gonna eliminate the options that are weakening the argument. Anything that attacks the author's position will have to be eliminated, right? So no impact, weaken. These two options are eliminated. Then the third type is something that strengthens the argument, because we said assumptions are necessary premise, right? And premise is something that supports the argument. But then the other requirement for being the assumption is the necessity part, right? So we are not going with any option that just supports the argument, because it is not a strength in question, right? We understand that it is not a strength in question. So it will have to sort of, fit both these tests. One, supports, and two, also necessary, right? So any option that just supports but not necessary will also be out. What are these options like? These options could present new evidence. It supports the argument, but not necessary. Or it could contain some new data. It could be some example, right? So this new evidence, this new data, this example, although it supports the argument, it's not necessary. If it's not necessary, it's not an assumption, right? So the three types, again, something that has no impact, irrelevant to the conclusion. Two, something that weakens the argument. And three, something that strengthens but not necessary, right? Then, okay, so having looked at the incorrect choices, right? How do we eliminate some of these wrong choices? How will a correct answer look like? What exactly will the correct answer do, right? Now, again, the correct answer could be any of these two types. One, linking assumption, right? So what is meant by linking assumption? So linking assumptions are those statements that fix a certain gap in the argument, right? The author is talking about something in the premise on the basis of which the author has taken a jump and concluded something, right? So always, there'll always be a gap between the premise and the conclusion. Sometimes that gap is quite glaring, quite blatant. Other times the gap is, not nearly noticeable, right? But in any case, there'll be some gap in the argument. The linking assumption would fix that gap, right? It links the premise to the conclusion. It links the idea in the premise to the idea in the conclusion, right? So we can call it as a missing link, right? It is a missing link that is stated in the option, or it is a bridge between two pieces of information in the argument, right? They're easy to spot, right? And especially those students who have done some assumption questions, who have done some mocks, for them, it becomes somewhat easier to spot these options, right? Now, the other option, the other assumption, or the other type of assumption could be the protecting assumption. So what is a protecting assumption? They're slightly harder to spot immediately. And, at times they may even look irrelevant to the argument, right? They may start off as a bad option, by the way. You are reading them and you think these are extraneous to the conclusion, right? They don't relate to the argument so much. Such is the nature of these options, right? And we will do some questions spotting these protecting assumptions, right? So yeah, they may not start off as very attractive options, but what they are doing is, and why they are correct is, they're actually protecting the author's position, right? How? By killing off an alternative explanation, maybe. For example, the author thinks A causes B, or A is the explanation for B, for something happening, B, right? And this option says C is not the cause of B, or C does not explain B, right? So it kills an alternative explanation, or it kills an attack or something that could threaten the argument, right? So on the one hand, the linking assumption, what they are doing, they are connecting these two pieces of information in the argument and providing that essential link. On the other hand, it could also be a protecting assumption, which actually thwarts an attack or protects the argument against an attack being made on the argument, right? These are usually negative statements because they are saying that this attack or this is not an alternative. For example, C is not an alternative, right? So they're usually negative statements. And in being negative statements, they are saying that this won't attack the argument, or they are killing off an attack to the argument, right? So yeah, in any case, right? In any case, whether it is a linking assumption or a protecting assumption, they both are necessary for the argument, right? And they both make the argument better. What do I mean by that? For example, if I take any of the assumptions, right, the correct option, and make it part of the argument becomes a better argument than the original argument. Because what I'm doing, I'm just picking up this option, the correct option, I'm plugging it in the argument, I'm making it part of the argument, right? Because we said assumptions are necessary premise. So if I'm adding a premise to the argument becomes better. Now, whether it is a linking assumption or a protecting assumption, right? So they both are essential, right? Then, negation test, right? I'm calling it elephant in the room. Why am I calling it the elephant in the room? Is it's probably the most talked about technique whenever we are solving assumption questions. This is the first thing that that the teachers tell you, right? This is the thing that you do. You negate the option and you check whether it is an assumption or not, right? But let me tell you that it is misunderstood, right? It is one of the most misunderstood concepts in critical reasoning. How and why? Because firstly, we don't have to employ the negation test on every option, by the way. It can't be our go-to approach, right? It's not that the moment I encounter an assumption question, I start negating each of the options and checking whether this option is correct or not. We don't have to do that. Remember, we just checked the incorrect choices, the wrong choices in these questions. So first thing first, just eliminate those options that are immediately obvious, right? Something that weakens the argument, eliminate. Something that is irrelevant to the claim, eliminate, right? So I don't have to negate these two choices. These are already eliminated, right? Now, if it comes down to two options, right? And I'm not sure which one is actually necessary, or I think both of them support, I'm not sure which one is necessary, then maybe I'm employing this approach. I'm negating that option statement. I'm checking whether on negation it attacks the argument, right? If it does, then this is an assumption, right? So the idea is that use negation test sparingly only when required, right? First thing, eliminate some choices. Make the question manageable. If you are reaching the answer just by elimination, nothing like it, right? If you are not, if it comes down to two options, then maybe I'm applying the negation technique. I'm negating these options and confirming whether they are necessary or not. Okay. Now, so yeah, the test we understand, right? The test is negate the option. If the argument falls apart, the option is necessary. If the argument still works, it wasn't necessary, right? So that's the test. But the idea is using it sparingly. So don't use it on every option. Eliminate the obvious wrong choices first, and don't make it your primary solving strategy that I'll eliminate whenever I encounter assumption question. I'll start doing the negation test, right? And after it, so the use it, how to sort of use it is when you are left with two plausible choices, and to check which option is truly necessary for the argument, right? Okay, now what we can do is we can do some of the questions, and we'll start off with this one. And what we can do is, so these questions I've picked from our critical reasoning black book, right? In the black book, we have curated many good questions on each of the topics: assumption, strengthen, weaken, inference. So I picked some questions from that book, and those are the questions we are discussing here. So we'll start with this one. On every question, I'll give you a minute or two to first answer it. You let me know in the chat, in the live chat, as to which answer you have, which option you have picked, and then we'll discuss, right? So now let's do this question. All right, so let's look at this question, everyone. We have gotten some answers. Right. So it says the simple facts are these: the number of people killed each year by grizzly bears is about the same as the number of people killed by lightning on golf courses, right? So the number of people killed each year by grizzly bears is about the same as the number of people killed by lightning. Now, and the number of people killed by lightning on golf courses each year is about the same as the number of people electrocuted by electric blenders, right? So whether you are killed by grizzly bears, it is the numbers are equal to the number of people killed by lightning, and it's equal to number of people who got electrocuted. On the basis of this, all the horrible myths and gruesome stories aside, therefore, this is the conclusion, and we are fixing the conclusion first. A grizzly bear is, in fact, about as dangerous as an electric blender or a game of golf, right? Based on the numbers. So, what's the assumption here? Again, we are looking for something that is necessary, right? So, A, most incidents involving grizzly bears are fatal. So, I'm asking, do we need this? Do we need this to say that grizzly bear is as dangerous as a game of golf? No, we don't need this, right? So, I can say it has no impact on my conclusion. We don't need this. Out. B. Grizzly bears are no longer the danger they once were. Do I need this for the conclusion to hold? No. B is out, no impact. C. The number of fatalities per year is an adequate indication of something's dangerousness. And it said, because of the numbers, grizzly bear is as dangerous as electric blender or a game of golf. Do we need this? Yes. What kind of assumption is this? Linking. It links the premise to the conclusion. It links number of fatalities to dangerousness, right? So dangerousness was talked about in the conclusion. Number of fatalities was talked about in the premise. It links the two. It's essential. A golf course is particularly dangerous place to be in a thunderstorm. No impact. Easy. Option C is correct. And just did you realize we did not use the negation test? We did not feel the need to use the negation test. We were able to eliminate A, B, and D quite comfortably. Option C is correct. Right? Let's do the next one. All right, let's do this. So it says during the past year, nationwide membership in health and fitness clubs have declined by about 7%. Okay, so membership in health and fitness club declined by 7%. Over the same time period, sales of fast food products widely known to contribute to health problems have risen about the same percent, as in 7%, right? So fast food products have gone up 7%, and membership in the health and fitness clubs has declined by 7%. Now look at the conclusion again. These statistics clearly show that consumers have become decreasingly concerned about their health and level of fitness during the past year. Is there a gap in the argument? You may be wondering, not so much, right? It makes sense. If these numbers are true, it makes sense that they have become less concerned about their health. But there's still some gap, right? It may not be a very blatant one, but there's still some gap. From these statistics, the author is making a conclusion about their concern, consumers' concern for their health, right? From this decline and from this increase in fast food consumption. Also, it could be the case, right, that this decline is due to, people have started doing, workouts, have started working out at homes, right? And this increase in sales of fast food products could be attributed to, let's say, a boom in the tourism, in that particular country, right? So tourism boom, and people started working out at homes, right, instead of going to the gym. Then we can't really say that, consumers are less concerned, right? So I'm just helping you, understand there could always be gaps in the argument, even if it looks like a very good argument upfront, right? Let's look at the options. Option A: concern about health is a major reason that consumers join fitness clubs and maintain their memberships. Remember what he said? He said that membership has declined. Therefore, consumers have become decreasingly concerned about health. So the assumption is linking the two: concern about health, which is the conclusion, and joining this fitness clubs and membership going down was given in the premise. It links the two, it provides that necessary link. Option A looks very good. B, the overall level of health and fitness among consumers decline over the most recent 1 year period. Okay, it says, this happened, the level of health and fitness happened over the most recent period. Is it absolutely critical for the argument? Actually, no. Again, I'm just, the question to option B is, are you really needed for the argument that this happened over the most recent 1 year period? No, right? I'm saying no impact. Does it really connect decline in membership to concern about fitness or concern about health? Not really, right? B is not required. C, consumers spend less money on health and fitness club memberships than on fast food during the past year. Now, what amount of absolute money they spend is not the concern of the argument. This is a typical outside the scope outside the scope of the argument. Argument was simple, that membership has declined by 7% and fast food products, sale of fast food products have gone. Now, how much absolute in money terms, how much they have spent is not really concerned. It's not really something that is critical for the argument, right? It could still be the case that they're spending much more on health and fitness. ऐसा हो सकता है that there was a 7% decline, but they're still, consumers on a whole are still spending more money here and less money on fast food. That could still be the case, right? So it's not necessary for the argument. C is out. D, fitness equipment designed for home use has become increasingly affordable over the past year. That too. So it looks like providing an alternate explanation. Yes or no? It looks like they have started working out at homes. So, in fact, this looks like something that weakens the argument, that it's not that they are less concerned. It's just that they have started working out from their homes because fitness equipment has become increasingly affordable. So it attacks the argument, and therefore it cannot be the assumption. Right, everyone? So again, we have the correct option as a linking assumption. So Yukta is saying that B is repetition. Uh, uh, Not really, right? Because if you look at B, Yukta, it says overall level of health declined. The conclusion is that they have become less concerned about the health. Whether their level of health actually declined, that is irrelevant. It's the conclusion is just that their concern, right, for health has declined. Okay, so B is not relevant to the conclusion. Option A is correct. Okay, let's do the next one. So this drill, right? If you're solving it live and online, the drill itself will sort of help you internalize this concept of assumptions. And I'm telling you, if you're solving these questions along with me, the chances are high you'll perform better on these questions even during the mock because you are constantly internalizing the concept. Okay, so let's do this one. All right, let's solve this. So let's look at the argument once, fix the conclusion, and check what is necessary. We have heard a good deal in recent years about the declining importance of the two major political parties. We have heard, this is not the conclusion, right? The author is saying we have heard of it. Let's see if the author agrees with it or not. It is the mass media, we are told, that decide the outcome of elections, not the power of the parties. So far, the author has not stated his position. But, and this is always an important word, but it is worth noting that no independent or third party candidate has won any important election in recent years. And in the last nationwide campaign, the two major parties raised and spent more money than ever before in support of their candidates and platforms. It seems clear, and this looks like the conclusion line. It's like a conclusion indicator right here, right? Conclusion indicator. It seems clear that reports of the imminent demise, that you know that they will eventually, the two-party system will eventually die down and it will become a multi-party system, are premature at best. So the author is saying it does not seem like that the two-party system is gone or is about to go, about to get replaced by multi-party system. It does not seem to be the case. It is premature means maybe it will happen in the future, but currently there are no signs. This is the conclusion, right? What premise are given in its favor? First, we'll identify the premise. This is first premise. I'll write P1. No independent or third party candidate has won any important election in recent years. This is premise one. And premise two is, in the last nationwide campaign, the two major parties raised and spent more money than ever before in support of the candidates and platforms. This is given as premise two. So one, no, as in no third party candidate or independent candidate has won any important election. Two, the two major parties still spend more money than ever before. So they are getting the most funding, these two parties, in support of their candidates and platforms. These two reasons. And maybe I'm wondering, yeah, there is this gap. How is getting more funding, right? From this, I can say that the two-party system will not die. How can I say this? That they're getting the most funding, therefore the two-party system will not die. It looks like some gap. Let's see if any option, fixes that gap. Look at it. The amount of money raised and spent by a political party is one valid criterion for judging the influence of the party. What about A? Does it fix that gap? Yes, it does. It links, right? It links that the fact that two parties are raising and spending the most money to the claim, to the conclusion that they are still very, very relevant. They won't be replaced by a multi-party system, right? If I'm saying this is no criterion, this is no valid criterion, the argument falls apart, right? So A looks very good. B, a significant increase in the number of third-party candidates would be evidence of a decline in the importance of the two major parties. Okay. Really, actually, increase in the number of third-party candidates is not at issue. What is at issue? That they are not winning. Having candidates is not a problem. They are not winning. And the two parties are getting enough funding. These are the two reasons, not the candidates. Even if there are many candidates, it won't impact the argument. They will have to win, right? So it is no impact. B is out. C, the two-party system has contributed significantly to the stability of the Indian political structure. Stability? Really? That's not discussed. Whether it is desirable or not, we don't know. It's just that they're not going to become a multi-party system in near future. Just that. Whether they afford stability or not is not discussed, out of scope. D, the mass media tend to favor an independent or third-party candidate over a candidate from one of the two major parties. No impact. How does this impact the conclusion that the two-party system will not die in near future? It doesn't. D is out. Option A, the linking assumption is correct, everyone. All right, let's do the next one. And maybe some of you guys have now sort of settled in, and maybe from here on, your accuracy will improve. Let's see. Let's do this, okay? It says every domesticated large mammal species now in existence was domesticated thousands of years ago. Okay. Since those days, people undoubtedly tried innumerable times to domesticate each of the wild large mammal species that seemed worth domesticating clearly. And we have the conclusion here, right? So let's fix it. Therefore, most wild large mammal species in existence today either would be difficult to domesticate or would not be worth domesticating. So let's say there were some species which they weren't able to domesticate, right? Let's say, let's call it past failure. Failure in the sense they weren't able to domesticate, right? So past failure to domesticate, past failure to domesticate, right? Some species. From that, the author is concluding that either that would be very difficult now or not worth it, right? So it's talking of now. Just look at this. So today, either would be difficult to domesticate or not worth it, because in the past, despite trying it for several times, right, for innumerable times, it says, right, the conclusion is this is difficult. These species are difficult or not worth it currently, right? Now, what if, in the past it was very difficult? It was very difficult to domesticate a wild cat, right? But now it has become easier, and people are domesticating wild cat, right? So, can I then say that past failure to domesticate a wild cat and therefore it is now difficult or not worth it? Maybe now it's worth it. Maybe wildcat, we have come to know that wildcat, serves a purpose, right? It can help, right? It can help in some way. We have discovered it later. Or maybe it has become easier to domesticate them because now we know the species, we have much more knowledge on the species. So can I really conclude from past failure to domesticate some species to saying that it would be difficult or not worth it today? Right? It will require some assumption. What is that? Let's see. A says, in spite of the difficulties encountered, at one time or another, people have tried to domesticate each wild large mammal species. Uh, okay. In spite of difficulties encountered at one time or another, people have tried to domesticate each wild large mammal species. I think it has slightly gone beyond the scope. Just look at this line. Firstly, it looks very similar to what is being said, but it is slightly different. Just look at the line again. Notice how it says, people undoubtedly tried innumerable times, right? I'm reading the second line of the paragraph, everyone. Tried innumerable times to domesticate each of the wild large mammal species. And just look at this part. That seemed worth domesticating. That seemed worth domesticating. So maybe there is a species X, okay, species X, which to them did not seem worth domesticating, right? It did not seem worth domesticating, and they left it, right? They left it. They are not even trying, right? So A says, at one time or another, people have tried to domesticate each wild large mammal species. So if I deny this, no, they haven't. They haven't tried species X. Will it hamper the argument? Will it cause the argument to fail? Actually, no. Because again, they were trying to domesticate those species that seemed worth domesticating. And maybe not all species were worth domesticating. So this is not required. And this was a very close option, by the way, because it looked very similar to what the author was saying. But it is not. We just discovered. So A is out. Let's look at B. It's not much easier today to domesticate wild large mammal species than it was in the past. So this is really sort of interesting. We said in the past, we may have failed to domesticate those species which we thought are worthy domesticating. And therefore, I'm concluding that now they are either difficult or not worth it, right? So the assumption there is it is not much easier today, because if it is, then I can't make the conclusion about the present. So it is not much easier today to domesticate wild large mammal species than it was in the past. So to understand this option better, I'll just deny this. तो यहां पर आ गया negation test. Negation test. So, we will use negation test when it is required. So I'm denying this. I'm saying it is much easier today to domesticate wild large mammal species than it was in the past. The argument falls apart, right? It attacks the argument on negation. So this is absolutely required, right? And this is the kind I was referring to as protecting assumption. It protects the argument from an attack, right? It shields it from the attack that it has become easier today. So if it has become easier today, the argument gets attacked. By using the not, it has shielded the argument. So it is making the argument better, right? It is making the argument stronger, and it is absolutely required. Look at C. Not all of the large mammal species that were domesticated in the past are still in existence. Completely irrelevant. I'm sure you would have eliminated this quite easily. D. The easier it is to domesticate a wild large mammal species, the more worthwhile it is to do so. No such link is required. That the easier it is, the more worthwhile it is. No such link is required, right? Maybe it is difficult to domesticate, uh, I don't know, a buffalo, but it is more worthwhile, right? Maybe it is easier to domesticate a cow, but it is less worthwhile than to domesticate a buffalo, right? I'm just using these examples. So this link is not required. Option B is correct there, right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay. Before we start discussing this one, there was a doubt in the chat regarding the previous one, that you would need another explanation for option A. Okay. So let's look at option A. It says, in spite of the difficulties encountered at one time or another, people have tried to domesticate each wild large mammal species, right? And it looks, as I said, very similar to what the author is saying, but it is not. So look, the author is saying people tried innumerable times to domesticate each of the wild large mammal species up to this point. They're same. Now just look at this part. That seemed worth domesticating, right? So it's like they tried domesticating each species that seemed worth domesticating. And I use that example. For example, species X, there is this species X. They find it not worth domesticating, right? Not worth domesticating. So they'll not even consider it. They'll not try domesticating it, right? Now look at A. A says they have tried to domesticate each wild large mammal species. If I deny this, they haven't tried to domesticate each of the species. In fact, they did not try to domesticate species X because they did not think that it is worth domesticating. Even then the argument works, right? Because just look at this again, that seemed worth domesticating. Those species, even if there are some species they did not try domesticating, the argument will work because they did not seem them worthy of domesticating. So A therefore is not required. Okay. Okay. Now this one, right? You may have solved this, and let's discuss this. It says, and you can let me know your answers again. People with major depressive disorder are much more likely to have immune disorders. So people who are suffering from major depressive disorder are more likely to have immune disorders, right? Whatever, such as lupus and chronic fatigue syndrome and all of that. This suggests strongly the major depressive disorder reduces the body's ability to fight infection. And ability to fight infection would mean immune disorder, because your body is not capable enough to fight infection. So you have immune disorders, right? Because primary infections are thought to be cause of many of these immune disorders, right? So what the author is saying, I'll put it simply, the premise is that major depressive disorder and immune disorder, it is observed that they happen, let's say, together. Or let's say it's given, are much more likely to have immune disorders, in the sense that people who have this also have this. People who have major depressive disorder also have immune disorder, right? On the basis of this, the conclusion is drawn that the major depressive disorder causes immune disorder because it reduces the body's ability to fight infection, right? So the author is drawing a cause-effect relationship based on this, let's say, correlation. Correlation kya hua? That A and B are correlated in the sense that A and B are happening together. So MDD and immune disorder are happening together in people. Based on that, the author is concluding MDD causes immune disorder. Now again, I'm just wondering to myself, could it be the case that immune disorder is causing the major depressive disorder and the author's reading is incorrect? Agreed that major depressive disorder and immune disorder are happening together. But maybe the explanation is that immune disorder is causing this major depressive disorder and not the other way around, as the author is concluding, right? So, immune disorder causing MDD, right, actually weakens the author's argument, yes or no? It would weaken the author's argument, right? Because author is concluding this is causing immune disorder. I'm saying immune disorder is causing. We happen to see it together in human beings. Maybe it is the reverse, right? So this weakens the argument, right? Or the author is assuming this is not the case, right? Let's look at the options. A, people who are depressed do not tend to overstate the severity of their symptoms. Okay, what's that to do with the argument? Nothing. How they express it has no bearing on the argument. A is out. No impact. No impact. B, people with major depressive disorder are less careful than others about protecting themselves from infection. Okay. So look at this. This is interesting. People with major depressive disorder are less careful. So could it be the case that since they are less careful and that's why they have immune disorder? Then it looks like less careful is the cause and not major depressive disorder. According to the author, depressive disorder is the cause. This says maybe less careful, right, is the cause. So it looks like it gives an alternative explanation. Alternative explanation to what the author is giving will weaken the author's argument. If somebody is saying something else is the reason, something else is the explanation, something else is the cause, the author's argument gets weakened. So it can't be the assumption. Let's look at C. Major depressive disorder does not usually have a very sudden onset. Sudden onset. The timing of it. Is it really discussed? No, right? Again, this is no impact. No impact option. The timing of it. Look at D. Immune disorders do not cause major depressive disorder. Remember, we said immune disorder. If immune disorder is causing depressive disorder, then the author's argument is weakened because the author is saying depressive disorder is causing immune disorder. It's like the author is saying A causes B. Second, the author is saying A causes B. And this option is saying D is saying B has not caused A. Is it necessary for the argument? It may not look like, but it is. Because if I deny this, I say B causes A, then the author's argument A causes B gets weakened. Right? So it is protecting the author's argument and D is correct. Again, look at this negative statement. B has not caused A. It protects the author's argument that A causes B. Right? So D here is correct. Everyone. Right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. And it may be worth, for example, you are not getting some of these questions exactly. right? Let's say there's still some, discomfort. What it will be, it'll be of value if you watch this session again and solve these questions again. Okay, right. Let's do this one. All right, let's look at this one. So the brains of identical twins are genetically identical. When only one of a pair of identical twins is schizophrenic, certain areas of the affected twin's brain are smaller than corresponding areas in the brain of unaffected twin, right? So it says when the brains of these identical twins, just a second, when the brains of these identical twins, they are generally genetically identical, but if one is suffering from schizophrenia, right, the areas of the affected twin's brain are smaller compared to the areas of in the brain of unaffected twin. No such differences are found when neither twin is schizophrenic. Therefore, this discovery provides definitive evidence that, and this becomes the conclusion. Again, there is a cause-effect conclusion. Whenever there is a cause-effect conclusion, be mindful of any alternative explanation. The alternative explanation will weaken the argument. Just look at this one. Schizophrenia is caused by damage to the physical structure of the brain, right? So damage to the physical structure, damage to the brain causes schizophrenia, right? According to the author. Now, let's look at A. The brain of persons suffering from schizophrenia is smaller than the brain of anyone not suffering from schizophrenia. Now that may look attractive in the first glance, but just look at it more closely. It says brain is smaller. That's not what the argument is saying. The argument is saying certain areas are smaller, you know, in the schizophrenic brain compared to those areas, corresponding areas in a non-schizophrenic brain. So it talks of certain areas, not brain as a whole. So not required is out. B, the relative smallness of certain parts of the brain of schizophrenics is not the result of schizophrenia or of medications used in its treatment. Okay, so smallness is like damage, right? Smallness is equated to damage. Okay, now it says the relative smallness or the damage is not the result of schizophrenia. Remember the conclusion, I've written it. Damage has caused schizophrenia. What if schizophrenia has caused the damage? Will it weaken this claim? Yes, it will weaken the claim, right? That it is the reverse. But if I'm saying this is not the case, it actually protects the argument, much like the previous question that we did. The author says A causes B. This option says it is not the case that B causes A. And therefore it protects, because if I deny this and if I say B causes A, it will weaken the argument. So it is protecting the argument from such an attack, protecting assumption. B is very good. Look at C. The brain of a person with an identical twin is no smaller on average than the brain of person who is not twins. Again, that's not relevant, right? That's not relevant. We are concerned. We are not saying, the argument is not saying that the brain of somebody who's a twin is smaller or bigger than the brain of somebody who's not a twin. That comparison is not made. The comparison made is somebody suffering from schizophrenia, certain areas are smaller than corresponding areas in a not schizophrenic sort of individual. Just that. Whether the brain is smaller of twins and compared to those who are not twins is completely irrelevant, no impact. D, when a pair of identical twins both suffer from schizophrenia, their brains are the same size. Again, it talks of brain being of the same size. We are concerned with certain areas of the brain, right? D is out. In fact, most of you would have eliminated A, C, and D merely because it talks of brain as a whole and not certain areas of the brain. Right? So D is also out. Option B is correct. Okay. Let's do the next one now. Before that, let me just clear the markings on the screen. Just a second. Just give me a second. Let's do this one. All right, let's do this one. So it says, the past holiday weekend, the number of traffic accidents that occurred on a particular stretch of Highway 79 was 25% lower than the corresponding number of accidents last year in the same location over the same holiday weekend. So number of accidents was 25% lower, right? So previously past holiday weekend, right? So last year, let's say last year this number was 100, and now current year, let's say current year it is 75. So based on this, the author is concluding that highway patrol's publicity campaign against speeding is the cause. Campaign. So campaign is the cause for the decline in accidents. Right? Let's say this year, some part of the road, some part of this highway was closed for traffic. Let's say that. Can I still say that these fewer accidents are attributable to the campaign? No, because the road was closed. The road was closed. Therefore, decline in accidents. Right? Road was closed for much time, right? Let's say for on the weekend, holiday weekend, the road was closed for 10 hours, let's say, or more, 20 hours. Let's say the road was closed for 20 hours, and therefore decline in accidents. Will it weaken the argument that campaign was the cause for decline? Yes, of course, because there is some other reason. If I'm providing some other cause, an alternate explanation, it will weaken the author's argument, right? So let's see. Traffic accident rates on the particular stretch of Highway 79 will continue to drop as long as the patrol's publicity campaign continues. So it says it will continue to drop. So maybe it has reached its limit. The conclusion is simple. The conclusion is saying campaign has helped. It is because of the campaign. Without making any future prediction. Let's say currently the campaign was effective and it was actually the campaign that was the reason. But the author is making no claim on whether this will continue to have an impact. Even if the campaign loses its effectiveness in future, the author's argument could still stand. So a future prediction is not required. A is out. B says the two holiday weekends cover exactly the same calendar dates. They cover the same calendar dates. Does this matter? The idea is that, over the weekend, in year one, the accidents were more. In the current year, there's a decline. Whether they cover the exact dates does not matter. C. Highway patrol cars are patrolling the particular stretch of highway more frequently. If that's the case, it is again an alternate cause, yes or no? It is an alternate cause, right? That it is because they are the patrol cars are patrolling more frequently and people are mindful of that, and therefore there are less accidents. They are not driving rash. Then this weakens the author's argument that it is the campaign. It is not the campaign, it is because of this. So this option weakens the author's argument and therefore is out. Look at D. The total number of kilometers driven on a particular stretch has not decreased 25% or more since last year. The total number of kilometers has not decreased. And this is what we were sort of hinting at. Maybe let's say the road was closed for for most of the weekend, and you know there was no major car movement on the highway, and therefore there was a decline in accidents. Then I can't say it is because of the campaign. It's just that fewer cars were plying on the highway, right? If that's the case, author's argument gets weakened. Option D kills that explanation by saying that's not the case. So the option D kills an alternative explanation and thereby, becoming critical for the argument. It thwarts an attack. It protects the argument from an attack. So we have another protecting assumption in a cause effect argument. Another protecting assumption. Option D is correct. Okay. Let's see. Let's do the next one. Just clear the markings on the screen. Let's do this one. All right, let's do this one, everyone. Although we could replace the beautiful but dilapidated old bridge across Black River with a concrete skyway, we should instead replace it with a cable bridge. Okay. And this seems to be the author's viewpoint and conclusion. We should instead replace it with a cable bridge, even though this would cost more, this would be more expensive, sorry. The extra cost is clearly justified by the importance of maintaining the beauty of a river crossing, right? So we should opt for a cable bridge over a concrete bridge because it will be more beautiful. That's the simple argument. More expensive, but more beautiful. More beauty, is just more cost is justified by more beauty. Okay. Now, And this is a little tricky one, little difficult also because of that. And the option that really troubles people, the two options that it comes down to is option C and option D, right? But before that, we'll try to eliminate A and B. A says, it is no more costly to maintain a cable bridge than a concrete skyway. So costly to maintain is not the heart of the issue, right? The point is we should replace a cable, we should replace it with a cable than with a concrete skyway because it will be more beautiful. And we already know that cable will be more expensive, right? Uh, Replacing it with a cable bridge will be more expensive. Now, whether it is also costly to maintain such a bridge is not really discussed, is outside the scope. So A is out. B, a concrete skyway would not have any practical advantages over a cable bridge. Let's deny this. This is also a close option. It says a concrete skyway would not. Let's say it will have one practical advantage over a cable bridge, right? Uh, can the author still argue that because of the beauty, because of the fact that cable will be more beautiful, let's go with the cable bridge, right? Despite that concrete will have one practical advantage. Now, that one practical advantage would also be it will be less expensive. The author is already acknowledging it, right? So it could be that practical advantage could just be that it is less expensive, right? So as I said, the author is not assuming that it will have no practical advantage. In fact, one of the practical advantages is, as I said, could be the cost saving, right? So the author is already accepting that, right? So the author is not assuming this. So B is out, right? C says the beauty of the river crossing must be preserved. Must be preserved. Does the argument require that beauty is, I'll just rephrase this, beauty is essential? Does the argument require this? Look, the argument is simple. We should go with a cable bridge, right? Because it'll be more beautiful and it is important. It is important. But is it necessary? That will be a step further. If I'm saying go with A, because what A gives is important. But am I saying that whatever A gives, right, whatever A gives or supplies or provides is necessary? The author has not gone that far, that beauty is essential. All the author is saying, it is important. So C also, although it looks like a good option at first glance, it is not required. Look at D, and D is that straightforward linking assumption. Building a cable bridge across Black River would produce a more aesthetically pleasing result than building a concrete skyway. Aesthetically pleasing is just fancy way of saying more beautiful. Remember, did you notice the author never said this? The author did not say that uh, cable bridge will come out to be more beautiful than a concrete skyway. It may seem to us reading the argument that the author has already said it, but the author has not. We just made that connection in our heads. We made that connection in our heads because it was quite intuitive. Just look at the premise. The extra cost is justified by the importance of maintaining the beauty. Therefore, we should replace it with a cable bridge. Never has the author said cable bridge will come out more beautiful or will look more beautiful. Author has not said it. We made that connection in our head. But yes, that's absolutely necessary for the argument. D is correct. Okay, okay. Let's move on to the next one. So now we are doing something on a longer passage, right? So far we were doing it on the smaller ones, and it doesn't really matter. Let me tell you that. You may be wondering, how am I supposed to do assumption questions in a longer passage? I would say the drill remains the same, right? You have to fix the conclusion, right? Maybe fixing the conclusion in a longer passage will require more effort, will require more practice, but the drill remains the same. You fix the conclusion and you are just checking what is necessary, right? So we'll just apply this on a longer passage, right? And uh, this may be the last one that we are doing today, but what we can do is we can continue this series and we can not too long a passage. We won't be able to discuss it in this format in on a YouTube session, in a Zoom session. We won't be able to do a very long passage. It becomes really difficult to read it from the screen. But passages of such length we can sort of do in later sessions, right? But right now, the job at hand is reading this passage and then doing the other. This is just this, okay? This is not the entire passage is on the screen. There are no more paragraphs. We're just reading this and then we are moving to the question. Okay, so try this one. All right. So what we'll do is instead of solving the question immediately, what I'll do is we'll just go through the passage together once, and then we'll go to the question slide, and you can try and answer the question on your own first, and then we'll discuss it. But before that, let's quickly discuss the passage, right? So it says the editors of a new volume of Nightingale's letters view Nightingale as a person who significantly influenced not only her own age, but also subsequent generations. And it goes on to tell us as to what these letters said. They highlight her ongoing efforts to reform sanitary conditions, gives an example to support it. Then what else? It says it talks about the example is on the conditions in British barracks. She used sums raised through public contributions to found a nurses training hospital in London. In administrative matters, the editors assert her practical intelligence. So this is all what the editors are saying about her. So this is simply a narration of what the editors of the letters are saying. It does not really contain the author's own position. The author's own position actually comes in the second paragraph, so this becomes more important than the first paragraph. Just look at this. I believe that the evidence of her letters supports continued, and this is the author's position on the letters. So far, first paragraph was just narration. Now it says the author's position, continued respect for Nightingale's brilliance and creativity. So this is the author's position right up front in the second paragraph. It says when counseling of, and this is an example to support brilliance and creativity. When counseling a village schoolmaster to encourage children to use their faculties of observation, she sounds like a modern educator. Just look at this. Modern educator. Why? Because encourage children to use their faculties of observation. And maybe you are wondering, faculties, if I am insisting, encouraging children to use observation, why is it modern? Was it not a normal thing in during that period? Because maybe probably in this day and age, children are encouraged to use their faculties of observation. At least it is talked about. At least in theory, it's there. But modern educator, you're calling her a modern educator when she was saying this. Maybe she was one of the few people in that period who was saying this. Otherwise, it does not make sense, right? Anyway, maybe I'm not doing that kind of, let's say, analysis when I'm first reading it, but still, I'm encircling modern educator, observation, creativity, and brilliance because this is the author's position. First line is the position, and then this example of village schoolmaster is an example, right? Her insistence on classifying the problems of the needy in order to devise appropriate treatments is similar to the approach of modern social workers. So first modern educator and now modern social worker. Why? Because of this classifying the problems of the needy in order to devise appropriate treatments. As if nobody in that period actually did that, actually classified problems of the needy, right? So again, modern social worker, modern educator, these two things, she's doing stuff which was not the norm during the period. In sum, although Nightingale may not have achieved all other goals during the Crimean War, in sum, as in, this is the final summary, her breadth of vision and ability to realize ambitious projects have earned her an eminent place among the ranks of social pioneers. Pioneers also looks like first of the lot, right? She was She was the trailblazer, so to speak, right? So pioneer. So second paragraph is where the author's position is brilliance and creativity. The schoolmaster example is shown to is given to show that she was a modern educator, classifying the problems of the needy, modern social worker, and her breadth of vision and ability to realize ambitious projects places her among the ranks of social pioneers. Pioneers is the defining word. Okay. Now let's look at the assumption question. And as I said, I'll give you a chance to solve it on your own and then we'll discuss. So this is the assumption question. I'll just write down our the important things that that sort of state the author's position. Modern educator, social worker, pioneer, social pioneer. Right? These are the sort of observations or viewpoint of the author. Okay, let's do this. Which of the following is an assumption underlying the author's assessment of Nightingale's creativity? Modern educator, modern social worker, pioneer. A. Educational philosophy in Nightingale's day period did not normally emphasize developing children's ability to observe. Did not normally emphasize. What if I deny this? Actually, then it attacks the author's claim that she spoke or she worked like a modern educator. Yes or no? If this was the norm, there's nothing special about Nightingale then, right? If developing children's ability to observe was the norm, then there's nothing special about Nightingale. There's no creativity or, brilliance in that. I can only say that this was very creative and this was very effective and this was very brilliant, pioneering, only if it was not the norm in that period. And therefore, tell me if you agree and tell me if you realize is a protecting assumption, right? This was not the norm. This was not, the normal. If it were, then Nightingale was not special, right? So A looks very good. Let's eliminate the others. Nightingale was the first to notice the poor living conditions in British military barracks in peacetime. First to notice is not required. First to solve in that fashion. First to solve in a let's say in a systematic way, yeah, in that fashion, categorizing problems and then solving for them. So solving the problem in that fashion, she was the first. Noticing is not required. See, no educator before Nightingale had thought to enlist the help of village schoolmasters. Now, again, this looks like a very good option. But from the passage, we know this was not shown as a striking characteristic, or this was not shown as truly, being creative. in fact, enlist the help of village school masters is not really discussed. It just gives us an example that through her conversation with the school master, they were saying, and because of this fact, the focus is on, uh, you know, uh, encouraging children to use the ability to observe. That was the thing, right? That was the important bit. Not that she enlisted the help of village schoolmasters. Maybe that happened, enlisting people for help. But the approach is the one that makes it creative, right? So C is out. D. Until Nightingale began her work, there was no concept of organized help for the needy in 19th century Britain. Again, the focus is not on whether there was organized help, whether she was first to notice the problem. The focus is on the approach she employed. And that's where she was creative, right? Even if, for example, I'm saying, there were the concept of organized help was there, but it was not being practiced in the same way as Nightingale envisioned, or as Nightingale approached it. And that's the focus, right? The way Nightingale went about solving problems, right? So the approach is the focus, not that she was the first one to discover, she was the first one to notice, or she was the only one who was helping, right? So that's not the focus. Option A here is correct, protecting assumption, right? Okay, so we come to an end of this, but as I said, right, we will continue such sessions, and we can involve such longer passages, not very long, but similar length. And we did assumptions today. We want to continue this for strengthen and weaken and inference and even central idea, primary purpose, all of those topics. So we'll continue doing these sessions, right? In case you have not completely understood a question or two, replay the video, right? Solve these questions again. And as I had said earlier, there's always merit solving these questions live with us in these practice sessions, because you are, you are developing that instinct for the correct answer, and you are internalizing the concept much better, right? I'll call it wraps here, and I leave you with the promise that we'll continue these sessions and see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. One last thing, okay? It's just very anticlimactic. I'm sorry. One last thing, those people who are not CLAT possible students, we have this CR Black Book from which the questions were taken. And this book is a very handy book for somebody who's looking to build fundamentals of critical reasoning. And this is very, let's say, this is not theory heavy. Much of the explanation is through the previous year questions. And the book itself contains more than 100 questions to solve. The theory chapters are there on all possible CR topics that can be asked in CLAT or AILET. This is comprehensive, yet not very fat. It's not voluminous, it's comprehensive. And as said, it gives you a very practical approach to solving critical reasoning questions. I don't think there exists any other book, that gives you that kind of, let's say, insight. So I think we will be giving you a link, and this is, as I said, this is only for students who are not in the CLAT possible ecosystem. We will be sharing the link in the comment box. I don't know if it is already shared, but we'll do that, which will be a Google Drive link for you to express interest in the book. the book is not very expensive. I don't think it will be beyond 150. It won't be more than 150 rupees, right? So you can register your interest on that link, and we'll get to you. You can also mention the email ID. I think the Google Drive will have the column for email ID or phone number, right? And we'll get back to you on this. Okay. Yeah. So that's the end, and I'll see you soon. Take care.